Fellow citizens, supporters of President Brian Mundubile and the Tonse Pamodzi Alliance, I know that we have been communicating quite frequently from yesterday. The president, as an example, did a number of statements yesterday, and other leaders within, the Tonse Alliance equally, made a number of statements. Now, it is in a moment like this when we desire not to, create any void, because enemies of progress may want to fill that void with propaganda. So this communication, I will endeavor to give you a roll down, an account of what has happened since we voted the day before yesterday, and also try and give you the way forward. Now, forget about the, campaign period, because you all witnessed just how much we were persecuted throughout the campaign trail, literally stopped by the police, attacked, from different fronts by cadres who we had thought were angels. But forget about all that, because we don't want to sound like we are crybabies. Zambia voted finally on the 13th of August. Now, we all do understand that when you vote, the votes must be counted. And when the votes are counted, they must be registered on a document that has been established, which is called the G20. The G20 is a very important document because at any point you can refer to what was collectively agreed as the result that was obtained at every polling station. And I can tell you from where we stand, having participated in 4 general elections myself, there's no single polling station that can take the whole night after the votes are closed to count. Okay, so we can all agree that by midnight of the 13th of August, the day before yesterday, every polling station had completed the counting of the votes. When votes are counted, they have to be registered on a form called a G20. Now, to witness that this is a correct, result that was recorded at this polling station, all the participants represented by polling agents are supposed to sign against, the counting. Meaning that UPND must have signed, NRPU must have signed through the representative. G20 is the most important document in the election process, because whenever there's an argument, you can refer to that document because it was signed and witnessed by every representative. The only challenge comes in when the representative of different political parties are compromised. Then they can sign to something they don't understand or something that was not recorded. So at this stage, all the misgivings around this election can be settled by way of G20s. Now, when we put together all the G20s from all the polling stations, we have about 13,569, if I'm not mistaken, polling stations across the country. If you pick the G20s in all the 13,000 polling stations, it is possible that before the Electoral Commission of Zambia can even announce the election, you can determine who has won the elections. That must be clearly stated. In 2021, in 2016, President HH was on record saying, according to the PVT we've done, we have actually won the election. So let's be clear, because I know that Zambians are in a habit of being hyped up. There is no crime in asserting oneself that you have won the election based on the records of these records called G20s. However, the official declaration as to who has won the election is of course done by the electoral body. But there is no criminality in anyone asserting that they have won the election. I will give you as an example. In 2021, I participated in the election. By 21 hours that night, I had collected all the G20s, put together all the results, and I even knew myself that I had won the election. The following morning when I walked to the totaling center, when there were delays, I actually told the presiding officers that they had no reason to delay because I had won the election. Based on what? Based on the information that was recorded on the Gene 20s. Now, you must therefore understand that whoever would try to manipulate the election must be consistent with the Gene 20. And the law dictates that when the Gene 20s are signed, the stakeholders, the polling agents, must be given a copy to take to their respective political groupings. So any official of the Electoral Commission of Zambia that stops agents from collecting the Gene 20s are actually abrogating the law. From where we stand as the NRPUP, we have, through our agents, collected almost 98% of these Gene 20s. So when you hear the president saying we have won the elections, it is based on the results that are recorded on the Gene 20s that have been brought to our attention through our agents across the the polling stations. But of course, you saw what happened yesterday. Drama unfolded the moment Electoral Commission of Zambia abrogated the electoral law. It must be cleared here, colleagues, that unless there's a request from a returning officer for the results announcement to be suspended or the counting to be suspended, the electoral commissioners, the ECZ commissioners, or the chief electoral officer has got no authority to stop the counting, let alone the announcement of results. And funny enough, the excuse given by the Electoral Commission of Zambia to suspend the electoral processes yesterday was that there was violence. But we all did witness the violence they spoke about. It was one incident where Kalufianya, a criminal within the UPND, attacked a polling station and stole ballot boxes. There was another instance, maybe we can speak to just 2 or 3 instances of UPND criminals going to disturb polling stations. If indeed it was on the basis of violence or the disturbances at the polling station, the ECZ could have suspended the announcement of results just in those affected polling stations. But as it were, they announced the suspension across the entire country, which is very unprecedented and will go down in history as being the first time that the electoral body has acted so irrational and against the law. Now, fast forward, you all know, for fellow citizens, that gap that was created enabled elements of doom to do all manner of manipulation and schemes. So, we have now seen outrageous results coming from different places where we had already recorded victory for the NRPUP. We are seeing candidates being declared, candidates that had even lost and everything else. But I'll tell you this. It is important at this stage for every citizen to understand you can play with anything else. That is why, if Zambia, I have always been saying this from 2022, that you cannot appoint cadres to head the Electoral Commission of Zambia and expect that the elections are going to be handled in a fair and impartial manner. Clearly, I have been vindicated because the actions of the Electoral Commissioner of Zambia officials are inimical to us having a fair and free election. Now, we will not continue crying or sounding like crybabies. After all, I know that when we do this, communication, the praise singers are going to be all over suggesting that we are not crying. We are not crying. We are providing clarity to the turn of events. Fellow citizens, you are aware that part of what we have suffered as a blow on this journey has been the wanton arrest by the police of supporters of President Brian Mundubile, particularly those that have been working close to President Brian Mundubile. The biggest assault was when we traveled into Mongu, where over 30 of our members were apprehended for what was suggested as riotous behavior. Imagine Chester, imagine IDC, innocent entertainers were picked from their cars and charged for riotous behavior, thrown into a prison, facility without being presented before, the courts of, competent jurisdiction. As we speak today, our officials still are languishing in prison and police cells in Mongu as we speak. This is how many days? Almost 2 weeks now. The assault has continued. The agenda now had been to get everyone associated who has been working with President Brian Mundubile to have them locked up so that they could leave President Brian Mundubile to be alone. The saddest incidents happened yesterday. I'm sure you have learned of the happenings yesterday when President Brian Mundubile was attacked. Now, it breaks my heart because I've participated in 5 elections, or rather 4 elections. It breaks my heart to see this unprecedented actions of the state through state agencies to attack and assault participants in an election. President Brian Mundubile yesterday was assaulted by a contingent of men who we believe should have been soldiers. They started with breaking the gate at our offices in Zambezi. They went into our President's Kablonga home in Kudu Road. In the process, they picked up everyone who was with the president, and we have our colleagues, Honorable George Sanga missing. We have so many others who are missing. Sadly, some have been they've been seen, they're locked up at Lusaka Central Police. I'm speaking of my brother Patrick Mwansa, who is there with others. Sadly, some of our colleagues were shot at. As we speak, Honorable Kafwaya is battling for his life at Mainasoko. I cannot confirm very clearly, we have every reason to believe in the state he was, that even the ADC to the President Banda could have lost his life. Of course, I will not confirm, but we believe in the state he was picked by these men, we could have lost the man. So now, the president has been left very vulnerable and open. Of course, they let him go, but so many of his supporters, the people he has been working with, are languishing in police custody, in prison facilities. Some are in places where we do not know about. You do recall that 2 of our ladies, Anna, Israel, as well as Ambassador Martha, were equally followed by men in an unregistered car, shot at and abducted, only to be released later after a useless interrogation at the Drug Enforcement Commission. This record of events, colleagues or fellow citizens, are unprecedented and have never been witnessed in this country. You can therefore understand how far our friends are willing to go to get back into power. I know many of you condemned me when I said I am willing to die for my country, I'm willing to kill. You can now see that the people that cried loudest over that statement have now shown their true colors, that they are willing to go an extra mile to a point of shooting and killing people just so that they can retain power. So you can see who is worse. Those who are accusing us to have ill intention and those who are actually committing these actions or activities or decisions. Now, the intention of all this agenda is so that they can alter the will of the people, because the people have already decided, you the Zambian people, nothing will change from the decision that you already made on the 13th of August. If our friends were clever enough, they should not have allowed the voting to be done. They should not have allowed the counting of votes to have been done and records being generated through June 20s. To alter the results and the will of the people at this stage is a near impossibility. And one may have to go to great length and may have to do the unthinkable to change the situation or the status quo. And I want to be very clear here. All those that are scheming, instructing officials to alter the results, may have done this and they are late at the point when we were voting and when we were counting. When we are now in possession of the June 20s, it is extremely difficult, and anyone who is attempting to do this undertaking will have their fingers bent. Because once the people make a decision and that decision is recorded, it is very difficult to change that will. So I am here, therefore, now providing, a guidance as to how we proceed. As we speak now, totaling of these results that were generated at polling stations is underway in most totaling centers at constituency level. I am therefore, as instructed by my president, instructing all candidates, especially at presidential levels, and all officials accredited to the Electoral Commission of Zambia, not to leave the totaling centers until the totals have been put together and announcements made. Now, in this instruction, I am emphasizing that our officials must ensure that the June 20B that is being generated at the totaling centers must correspond with the results that were obtained at the polling stations through the June 20s. Because when these totals are put together, they are the ones that are going to be submitted to the National Totaling Center. So you as officials, members of parliament, accredited officials, shall not leave our totaling centers until this exercise is confirmed. And you are expected to then get a copy of the June 20B and submit it to the relevant officials as per the communication. Here is what I will say to you, the Zambian people. I know at this stage, some of you may have been thrown into despair because of the happenings, the abductions, the shooting, the arrests of the people around President Binwell. But here is what I will tell you. The enemy will not win and will not allow that to happen. The will of the Zambian people at this stage will not be altered, and no one single person will be allowed to alter that will of the people. And I'm speaking with authority, and I've said this a countless number of times. We are the last guardians of the peace of this country, and will not, allow any enemies of progress to alter the will of the people. For all those of you who have been thrown in despair, here is my assurance to you, and I say this with a lot of confidence. Yes, they will try to manipulate the elections, but they will not succeed, because the God we serve at this stage is wide awake. I'm sure you have been seeing the videos being posted on social media, how God is exposing all these criminals. That is to tell you that when you prayed, God did not ignore you. He answered. And at this stage, I am instructing all followers of President Binwell, do not despair. Put on your shoes, go to the totaling centers, because the fight has now started. You have to go to the totaling centers to ensure you give support to your colleagues who are in the totaling centers, making sure that the correct results are entered. If there's any one of you following yesterday's event who was on the verge of giving up, don't. The moment you give up, you are signing a death warrant, because I can guarantee you, these colleagues of ours, if we allow them to have power, They will change Zambia's, outlook forever. So we have every reason to ensure that we stop them as we have stopped them as when we voted and counted on the 13th of August, the day before yesterday. This message must be shared to all our structures, must be shared to all the citizens, especially those that are on the verge of losing hope in the effectiveness of the process and in the communication of the actual results as you voted. Continue to pray, and I'm asking and challenging the church. The Catholic Church, as we know, has been monitoring this election. We are asking on you, our bishops, the church leadership, to come through and work with us to protect this country. Now, when I speak to the will of the people could be HH winning or President Mpundu winning. But whatever the case, the will of the people must be respected, meaning no one should be allowed to manipulate the election. The nonsense we saw in Solwezi, where one candidate, a losing candidate, goes to stop officers, ECZ, intimidate them, and almost shutting up the police officers, should not be entertained anywhere in this country. The stealing of ballot papers, we've seen some characters, UPN officials who have been caught, as the case was in Solwezi. Now you imagine 20, and the results have been, disturbed. Should not, and all such characters must be locked up in prison instead of arresting by George Sanga and innocent people who simply are supporting a cause. The police must be arresting those criminals who have actually been altering the results of this election. My appeal to the men and women in uniform: yours is a sacred duty to defend this country against external factors or enemies, and also to ensure that you maintain peace. You should never be allowed to disturb a process that is constitutionally, agreed. That is election. Yours is to ensure that you look out for troublemakers and sort them and lock them up. When you are instructed to carry out unlawful instruction to a point of suspending the counting and announcement of results, say no, because that is unlawful. It is not provided for anywhere in our laws. Colleagues, we all desire to have a peaceful country, a country that the peace that we have harnessed for the last 62 years. Now is not the time when we should allow selfish interests and ambitions to override the interest of the entire nation. I'm calling upon all well-meaningful Zambians to get on your knees and pray. Your prayer should be that God exposes all these criminals who are trying to manipulate the will of the people. I'm calling upon all engaged officers at the ECZ, whether you are a returning officer, you are a polling staff. Don't engage yourselves in illegal activities, because when the will of the people is allowed to prevail, you are going to be on your own to answer for the atrocities you are going to be made to commit. This is when we need patriots, men who are going to stand and say no to money, no to any schemes of manipulation. This is when we need brave men and women who are going to advance the interests of the country, the peace of the country, and not personal interest. I wish you nothing but God's blessings, and I want to guarantee you that the will of the people shall be allowed to prevail. I'm the last man standing, Binwell Mpundu. God bless you and God bless our country. Shalom, shalom.